And welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and this is 10 cards you should be putting in your Commander decks, episode 30. And we are starting out this week with Druids Repository. 1 green enchantment. Whenever a creature you control attacks, put a charge counter on Druids Repository. Remove a charge counter from Druids Repository. Add 1 mana of any color. I'm really surprised I don't see this in Commander games more. I used to see it a lot back in the day in Edric decks. It was really good in those decks because you were attacking with all your little creatures all the time. Every time one of your creatures attacks, you're putting a counter on this. So if you attack with 6 creatures, you get 6 counters on it. And those counters you can remove all at once. So now you can add 6 mana to your mana pool on your second main phase if you want to. I mean, this card really speaks for itself. It's fantastic in any deck where you are just attacking a lot. You know, I suppose green is so great at ramping already that maybe that's why this doesn't see as much play. But it doesn't get much better than this if you're in a deck where you're attacking a lot. Coming in at number 2 this week, Dual Nature, 4 green enchantment. Whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield, its controller creates a token copy of that creature. Whenever a non-token creature leaves the battlefield, exile all tokens with the same name as that creature. When Dual Nature leaves the battlefield, exile all tokens created with Dual Nature. This is just such a unique and interesting card. It's doing a lot of different things. I mean, first things first, the disclaimer or the addendum here is this works for your opponents too. Like I said in my last video, they really just don't make cards like this that sort of have these universal effects that work for everybody. I like cards like that because it makes you actually think before just auto-including it in your deck. So you're going to play a creature. When it enters the battlefield, you get a token copy of it. So it's fantastic in any deck where you have ETBs, first of all, I think. If you're in a blink deck, like a rune deck, every time you blink one of your creatures, it's going to enter the battlefield and create that extra copy. So if it's an Eternal Witness, now I get 2 things out of my graveyard. And when it leaves the battlefield, the token gets exiled. What do I care? I already got the effect, right? Also great in any deck where you are already doubling up those tokens, like in an Adrix and Nev deck. So now I'm going to get 2 token copies. Might also be a great inclusion in a Volo deck where you're sort of wanting to create token copies of your creatures as well. Just a very interesting card that has a powerful ability. Yes, it works for your opponents too, but obviously, like most of these kinds of cards, you're going to be taking more advantage of it than your opponents are, right? Coming in at number 3, Dueling Grounds, 1 green-white enchantment. No more than 1 creature can attack each combat. No more than 1 creature can block each combat. Simple as that. So it's basically a Silent Arbiter, but it's a white-green enchantment. That's probably why you're going to see Silent Arbiter a lot more than you see this card, because Silent Arbiter can go in any deck and this can't. It is an older card. It is a card that I used to see in Commander a lot more, never see anymore. Thought I would give it a mention. It does have a very powerful effect if you're in a deck, like a Uriel deck, where you have that Voltron commander that you're attacking with all the time, and you don't care about attacking with any other creatures. It's really great for that. You're probably in an enchantment theme there already as well. Or maybe you're in an Estrid deck where you're in an enchantment theme and you just really want to slow down the attacking. So now your opponents can only attack you with 1 creature because you don't really have that many. Definitely a really great card. Another really great card that I never ever see in Commander games is Set Sirens. 2 and a blue, Siren, 1/3. It has Morph, which is kind of weird. I always thought it was weird that this card had Morph. You know, there are some Morph cards where it just really doesn't make any sense that they have Morph, but I mean, whatever. So you can Morph it for 1 blue. The important part, though, is that you can pay 1 blue and tap target creature attacks target opponent this turn if able. That's a really great ability, very usable in a Commander game. This was printed in a Commander set, Commander 2014, and I just never ever see it. And maybe, you know, it's doing that sort of goad thing. I said the same thing about Sly Instigator. That was on my top cards from C21. I just think that's a fantastic ability. The only thing holding back cards like this is kind of you're annoying your opponents, right? People don't like you goading their creatures or making their creatures attack. Set Sirens, though, is particularly fantastic because you're picking target creature. So you're going to pick a creature an opponent controls, and you're going to tell that creature to attack another opponent. So it's even better than goading because it's not like you have to attack one of your opponents, you have to attack a specific one. So again, just like with Sly Instigator, it is a way to keep a creature from attacking you. So your opponent has a Blightsteel Colossus. Now you can use this ability to ensure that they don't attack you with that creature. Got to do it on their turn, obviously. Also, though, this is even better because you can point it at a certain opponent. I just can't believe this card doesn't see more play. Coming in at number 5, and this is a really interesting one, Dwarven Armory. Armory, 2 red enchantment. Pay 2 and sacrifice a land. Put a +2/+2 counter on target creature. Activate only during any upkeep step. So lots of really interesting things going on here. These old cards always do have stuff like this. +2/+2 counters, obviously. That's very unique. Not a lot of cards have that text on it. Activate only during any upkeep step, I thought was a very interesting. Like, you can activate this on your upkeep, or you can activate it on any of your opponent's upkeeps as well. Very weird. So where are you going to play a card like this? So I was thinking, first of all, in a deck like a Lord Windgrace deck, where you are wanting to probably sacrifice lands already, or you can get them out of your graveyard, so it's no big deal if you do. It can definitely be used there. It can also be used in a deck where maybe you're planning on destroying all the lands anyway, obviously. I was thinking, though, maybe even if you just think about a Krenko deck, right? If I'm in a Krenko deck, I'm going to pay 2 mana and sacrifice a land. So basically, if I have 8 lands in play, I can now tap them all down and sacrifice half of them and put 4 +2/+2 counters on some of my goblins. So that's a permanent boost effect. You can really speed up the game with something like that. But man, if I have like a Gauntlet of Power or even a Chaos Moon in play, like a mana doubler, right? So if I have a mana doubler, now I'm tapping those lands for 2 mana and then sacrificing them. Now for every single land I have, I can sacrifice that land to put a +2/+2 counter on one of my creatures, because obviously I can tap it and then sack it to itself. So just a very unique and interesting card that I think deserves a mention. I think it could definitely go in some decks where you either want to be sacrificing your lands, or you just want that big finisher. You know, like I'm in that Krenko deck and I tap all my lands and sacrifice them all and then run over my opponents. Coming in at number 6 this week, Dystopia. 1 black enchantment, has cumulative upkeep, pay 1 life. And at the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player sacrifices a green or white permanent. So I gave this card a mention in my Underwhelming Commanders series for my Ephemia deck. I thought it was a good fit there. Because it has that cumulative upkeep, you can just basically let it die whenever you want. You just don't pay the upkeep and it goes to your graveyard. You know, cumulative upkeep really gets a bad name, but if you think about it, especially with one where you're not paying mana, it's not that bad at all, okay? And if you're in a deck that doesn't have any green or white permanents, obviously this isn't going to hurt you at all, only going to hurt your opponents. So I'm going to play this on my turn, okay? I don't have to pay the upkeep right away. Goes to my opponent's turn and they have to sacrifice a green or white permanent. So all my opponents are going to get the effect from this before I actually have to pay any life at all. And then on my first upkeep, I pay 1 life. That's nothing. Then they got to do it again, right? I think definitely my opponents are getting hurt by this way more than I am. 2 life the next turn, no big deal. 3 life the next turn. This could easily get up to 4 or 5 life on your upkeep and still not be a big deal. And by then, are your opponents even going to have any green or white permanents left? Probably not. So I think you probably could put this in any deck, because it's rare that you're going to sit down at a table and have no players with green or white permanents. I doubt that very much. Going to be particularly good, though, if you're in a play group where you have opponents that are playing lots of those colors. Coming in at number 7 is Earthcraft. Very infamous card, 1 and a green enchantment. Tap an untapped creature you control. Untap target basic land. So for those who haven't seen this card before, I know it doesn't look like much on its face, but it is infamous because it goes infinite really, really quickly. So Squirrel Nest is the typical combo that you see with this. You put a Squirrel Nest. It's got to be on a basic land, right? Because you're untapping a basic land with your Earthcraft. You tap that land that has the Squirrel Nest on it to make a squirrel token, and then you use the squirrel token and the Earthcraft to untap that land, and then you do it again, right? Just 2-card combo, goes infinite, makes you an infinite amount of squirrel tokens. I just talked about Gave in my Commanders that don't really have a home video, and how, you know, he combos with so many different cards. This is one of the cards that he combos with. I know it's one of those cards that you're not going to see much because it's that scary card that does go infinite with a couple of different things, but you can just play this card as it was intended. You know, I just made one of my patrons a Miri Weatherlight Duelist deck where I thought it would be interesting to make a tap theme there, where you kind of want your Miri tapped all the time, and rather than having to attack with it, maybe you can just tap it down. So now I can use this card to tap down my Miri, untap untap basic land, right? It's great in any deck where I want to be tapping down my creatures anyway, so why not put it in that deck, because then I can also untap my lands and use them again. It's a really great card. Unfortunately, it sort of has that bad reputation, so maybe if you're in your playgroup, your buddies know that you don't have any infinite combos with it, and then it's perfectly fine. You know, if you don't have the infinite combo, it's really just an okay card, to be quite honest, but is definitely very playable. Coming in at number 8 is sort of more than one card. It's the Echoing series, and I think this is a series that doesn't get played nearly enough because it has the same name thing, and same name stuff doesn't work that good in Commander typically because not a lot of stuff has the same name. However, I think a card like Echoing Courage, 1 and a green, an instant, target creature and all other creatures with the same name as that creature get +2/+2 until end of turn. Pretty fantastic in any deck where you have tokens. It's going to pump your whole team, right? All your tokens are going to have the same name. Echoing Decay, 1 and a black instant, is going to do the same thing, but killing those creatures, right? So target creature and all other creatures with the same name as that creature get -2/-2 until end of turn. So that's going to work really good against that elf deck, for example, that your buddy's playing, because it's going to kill all of his elf tokens. Or maybe he likes Avenger of Zendikar, and now you can respond to him playing a land and kill all those plant tokens before they get a bunch of counters on them. Echoing Truth is the one that's going to be the best here. 1 and a blue instant, return target non-land permanent and all other permanents with the same name. This has actually been printed in a Commander set because people do use it in Commander from time to time, and it's going to do all of those things I just named. That's why it's probably the best one. I can now bounce all those treasure tokens, and I can bounce those plant tokens from that Avenger of Zendikar. I can bounce all those elf tokens, right? It's basically an anti-token card, right? Most of these cards in this Echoing series are anti-token cards, and tokens have been just really blowing up in the format lately. So I think these cards could definitely see some more play. Coming in at number 9, Elven Warhounds, 3 and a green, dog. 2/2, whenever Elven Warhound becomes blocked by a creature, put that creature on top of its owner's library. I really like this card, and I think it just has such a powerful effect. I know it doesn't look like much, okay? A 4-mana 2/2, that's terrible, but that ability is so powerful. And I think there's a lot of ways to use this card. First of all, this is a card that is never going to die from combat, right? You're going to attack with it. Whenever it becomes blocked, doesn't matter what it's being blocked by. It can be blocked by an Avacyn, going to go on top of that player's library. It can be blocked by a creature with First Strike and Death Touch. Who cares? No damage is getting dealt because as soon as it's assigned as a blocker, that creature's going on top of its owner's library. So first of all, this is a creature that you can just attack with always and never worry about it, right? It's not necessarily going to get through for damage, although if you gave it trample, it would always get through for damage. So if you threw a Rancor on your Elven Warhounds, it's always going to get through for damage. Always, 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 because it's going to get blocked, and it could get blocked by 100 creatures, right? Whenever it becomes blocked by a creature, put that creature on top of its owner's library. So if 100 creatures block Elven Warhounds, they're all going to go on top of their opponent's library. And if you have that Rancor on it, it's still going to get through for damage, right? So you can see how this is just such a very powerful ability once you start sort of manipulating it. The other thing you can do is put a lure effect on your Elven Warhounds. I did this in my Gore Muldrak deck, where now I can force my opponents to block. If I have a lure on my Elven Warhounds and attack with it, my opponent has to block with all their creatures, and all their creatures, they're going to scoop them up and put them on top of their library. That is so fantastic. Putting stuff on top of people's libraries is extra bad because not only have you wiped their board, but now for the next like 4 or 5 turns, all they're drawing is the creatures that they used to have in play. So it's just such a fantastic, powerful ability that you could almost build a deck around this guy. That's such a great ability, I think. And coming in at number 10 this week is Elkin Lair, 3 and a red, world enchantment. And I've mentioned a few world enchantments on my channel so far, and I will reiterate that the way a world enchantment works, and I think it's great, I really think they should continue printing world enchantment cards. There can only be one world enchantment card in play at a time, period. So if somebody has another world enchantment card, like Tombstone Stairwell is another one I mentioned in these videos, that one will blow up, right? You can only have one at a time. Not going to happen often, obviously, but just so you know. And the reason why is these world enchantments always have these really powerful universal effects. So at the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player exiles a card at random from their hand. that player may play that card this turn. At the beginning of the next end step, if the player hasn't played the card, they put it into their graveyard. So what are you going to do with this card? Well, the first thing I thought when I saw this card is I had recently been looking at the Adventures in the Forgotten Realms commanders, the most popular ones from the set, and to my surprise, Prosper Tomebound is far and away the most popular commander in the set so far. It's a card that I didn't even mention at all. 2 black, red, Tiefling Warlock, 1/4 with Death Touch. At the beginning of your end step, exile the top card of your library until the end of your next turn. You may play that card. So that sounds very familiar. And whenever you play a card from exile, create a treasure token. So this is just an auto-include in that deck, I think, right? It's just going to exile a card from your hand, and then you just have to play that card this turn, right? That's the only downside here. It exiles a card at random, and then at any time during your turn, you just have to play that card or it's going to go into your graveyard. It is random. That's not great. But also, I think it's going to hurt your opponents, right? That's the other way that you can play this card. So first of all, you can play it where you want to be playing stuff from exile. There are a few commanders like that now, but also you can be putting it in a deck where you want to hose your opponent. For example, your opponent is playing a deck where they don't want to cast stuff on their turn a lot, right? Like a Talron deck. A Talron deck is going to be playing stuff on other people's turns a lot, like counter spells, obviously. And what's going to happen is on their turn, at the beginning of their upkeep, a random card is going to be exiled from their hand, say a counter spell, and it's going to be sitting in exile waiting for them to play it, but they have to play it by the end of their turn. And obviously they're not going to counter anything on their turn. So what's going to happen is at the beginning of their end step, it's just going to go into their graveyard. So basically what this becomes for like a control deck is that player just discards a card out of their hand every single upkeep. So it can be really good at hosing decks like that. So I'm putting this card in a deck where I want to be playing stuff from exile, for which there's a few options now for that. And also I want to be hosing the player that is playing stuff on other people's turns. But that is it for today. That is 10 more cards that you should be putting in your commander decks. And if you are thinking about purchasing any of these cards, give my TCG Player link a click. I have sold over $10,000 worth of cards for TCG Player so far, so I don't know, maybe I should ask those guys for a raise. But give the link a click if you want to help support the channel. But that is it for today, and thanks for tuning in.